you'll be confronted with something like this. And just like, I think I might have mentioned this in the course of talking about After Effects, it goes a million times more for Maya. It's a matter of screening out what you don't want to mess with yet. Right? Like, in After Effects, right, you could basically make a nice animation with just the position, scale, and rotation keyframes, plus maybe like Gaussian blur and levels. Right? You could get rid of most of the functionality and just concentrate on a few things. And in Maya, there is so much here, right? The first thing to realize with this, and its interfacing is insane. So I'm just going to walk us through it in about 15 minutes, just making a thing and getting it out of Maya. Like ways to get things in, ways to get things out. So first thing to realize is that the entire interface changes based on what you do here. This is the first, step into madness. Like this, why would they do this? I don't know. Watch. It doesn't seem to change, but look at the options on the top, which are so many they run off a 1280 screen. Animation, polygons, surfaces.
They don't even put this in the
dynamic
videos at the beginning.
Exactly. So most people begin looking at this and like they are told to go look for thing and they don't see it. Because it depends on what you have selected here. And this is also where things come in where if you learn to program early, you have this advantage because there were fewer features. I learned on Maya 1.0 in '99, so I took my first class. It crashed a lot more, if you can believe, but it was there were fewer of these. So you want to stick to polygons and rendering for starters. Polygons will make stuff. The surfaces are the NURBs that Omar just mentioned. NURBs are entirely made out of curves, and they basically aren't so useful for conventional modeling the way we would do an animation program. I know they have their uses in industrial design.
But it's also very good if you're trying to use a multi-scale thing. So if you're trying to zoom in the same shot between like really far away and really close.
But wouldn't you use sub-Ds if you were just talking about animation?
Well, it depends. Today computers can calculate NURBs. And,
right. Well, my saying it's not a matter of calculation. It's just a matter of what they're used for. Like NURBs, you can't model a hollow surface, right? You can't model a. So my understanding is that they have specialized industrial design uses, but then there's something called subdivision surfaces, which are the sort of a hybrid of each that's used in VFX, like. But for our purposes, we can just use polygons. Like that's to learn. I strongly advise sticking at first to the polygons. So here, polygons, and then once you have your mode selected, you also have to choose your shelf of tools to work with. These work independently of these. Now, but remember, though, that it's all about sort of screening out distractions. This changes the menu options available to you up top. There's also, if you hold down the space bar, there is a, here, drag in the base and pull up. There's also a menu that you can go to. I've never even messed with that. Some people love it. This, and then you have a wheel-based controller. There are many ways to get around. I'm just going to stick to this. So go to your polygon tool and create some cubes. Drag in the grid, then pull up. Now, what you might want to write down at this point, your view modes are handled with the keys 4, 5, and 6, and 7, which won't appear to do anything at first. 4 for wireframe, 5 for shaded polygons, 6 for textures, which we'll get to in a second, 7 for lights.
So let me ask you a question. If you apply material, but you're in mesh,
right?
it won't show up.
Right.
Man,
So right-click on your object, go to Material Attributes. Yeah. And to apply a texture, you go into Color, of course. Now you can also use this just to change the color there. But notice that both squares change color. That's because if you want to create a unique material, they all begin.
The default.
They begin with the default one. You have to say assign new. All these are different types of surfaces. Lambert is the default. You can give this a new name. So now when I change color here, only this one changes.
Sorry, I got lost when you changed the color. Where did you click to get
You right click on the. There are so many ways to get to this. If you go through like some Maya tutorials, then you'll probably find there's probably 10 different ways to get to here.
Is it paint?
The paint is actually really powerful and interesting. Paint lets you draw curves and apply effects to them. You can do crazy particle things with it. It's actually really interesting. But we won't get to that today. Let me know if anyone plays around with the Maya paint effects and would like to.
What is the thing we select?
Oh, you right-click on the object. This menu comes up, and you say Assign New Material. And this checkbox here lets you assign a texture, file. Well, this is ridiculous. And now you can navigate to.
Doesn't it come with any libraries?
How do you mean?
Libraries and materials?
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, like
It's worth it, yeah.
It's not with this is Autodesk, isn't it?
Yeah, it's worth exploring. Yeah. So I should also say here that I am holding down the Option key and dragging to pan around. I'm zooming in and out with 2-finger scroll, and then let's see which is the. There's a pan combo as well. This is easiest to do with a 3-button mouse. There we go. I'm holding down Option and Command to do both. To pan around. So there's a texture applied. So that's 4, 5, 6 now. And 7, it goes black because we have no lights. If you render at this point, you have default lights. So to do that, you want to go to the Rendering tab. Once again, the shelves give you your different icons here. And this drop-down menu changes the top options. So right now we haven't even messed with this yet, the top menus, right? We've exclusively been working with, we use the polygon menu to create some cubes, and now we're going to use the rendering menu to create a light. There are a bunch of different lights here. It's a volume light, sorry. These similar icons. The point light can be the easiest to work with to start.
Those lights translate to After Effects.
Well, in Cinema 4D, I know they can. I don't know about my I mean, After Effects can create lights as well. I know Cinema 4D can exchange files with lights and cameras in Maya. So here are our lights. Wireframe, shaded, textured, and lit. There's probably some buried menu thing. Given the choice between finding something in the menu 5 layers deep and pressing a keystroke, my instinct is usually to remember the keystroke. You can probably find out where the shortcuts, 4, 5, 6 are. 1, 2, and 3 are detail levels, by the way. That'll be more important once you have a bunch of complicated models. It's basically like putting things into draft mode in After Effects. So let's now create a camera. Cameras and lights both live in rendering. So here's your camera, which is here. Now, to position this camera, or position anything in the shot, that's where these tools come in. And these are Q, W, E, R. So Q. Q is your pointer. W is your translate tool. E is your rotate tool. R is scale.
Explains to me why when you hover over those different tools, they don't tell you those.
There should be some hotkeys.
Is there a way to know what those things are? No. What the shortcut key is.
Oh, they don't. I never even thought about that. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. Like, we're not born knowing this stuff. Presumably, there's a PDF cheat sheet somewhere. Actually, why don't I start typing these into the wiki as I go? And then I can elaborate on this if anyone.
The camera setup
right.
is way more intuitive
Than After Effects?
than After Effects.
Yeah. Remind me to get back to that in a second. That's why I still like to use the rigged camera in After Effects over the default one for anything complex. Here we have a camera, but we can't yet see what the camera is doing. So now, press spacebar to toggle between a four-way split screen view and your perspective view here. So here you have your right, front, top view.
Wait, how do you toggle back?
Spacebar.
Try spacebar.
Of course, it's like where would you learn this stuff if not from another human being?
But it's not toggling back. I got to toggle away.
Yeah.
To go back to your original view, you
Right.
select that view in the form.
Oh yeah. You don't even have to click actually. You just need to hover the mouse over it. So now you need to change one of these views to your camera, and you do that by saying Panels, Perspective, Camera. So now you can notice that when you move the camera around, the camera view changes. Or when you use your Option and Command tools in the camera view, you're also moving the camera. So this is kind of annoying, but it is kind of neat that you can change the camera by moving it in one of the other views, or you can change the camera position by moving it here. The same is exactly true in After Effects. It's just that this interface, one of its few virtues, is that it makes it really easy to understand what you're doing. So,
Say again, it's panels, perspective, and camera one.
right. And anyone who's used Maya more than me, because I've really only dabbled in it, feel free to call if you know a better way of doing this stuff.
And it's faster.
Yeah.
Like if you move a camera, it's like real view.
Switch
Yeah.
to,
Right there.
switch to
Drag.
Yeah, 3D. So now let's set the keyframe. First of all, so this is mercifully consistent down here, your timeline. Make sure this auto keyframe is turned on. Make sure that's red. It should be by default. Make sure it is. Because then, when you hit S with an object selected, you notice I have one keyframe there. After that, it will auto keyframe just like in After Effects. So if I then move to here, 48 frames, or we're at 24 frames per second. So if I then move to here, it auto keyframes. See? So now I play this back, and there we go. Here I'm going to I'll set this as well. I'll set it. And one nice thing is that when you set a keyframe by default, it sets keyframes for everything: rotation, scale. So if this is here, and then here, and then I also want to rotate it.
So all changes.
Right, and I'm pretty sure you can dive in one. There's an option where you can turn that off, but it is kind of nice normally that it keyframes all these attributes.
And the initial keyframe, how did you create?
S.
S.
And okay, so here we have. And okay, modeling is a whole, and look too, remember that I can zoom in my perspective view, move things around to get a better view, and then go to the camera view, and that hasn't changed. Which is pretty important because it can get really confusing to figure out where you are in 3D. So you can do a lot of things with this right-click menu, including going into a variety of editing modes. I said modeling is a lot to go into right here. But just as a quick demo, here is vertex. Those of you in graphics class may have met vertices, Patrick's graphics class may have met vertices already. Well, here, our cube is made up of 8 vertices here. And these can be keyframed. Everything in Maya, that's like an After Effects, everything can be keyframed. So I'm going to select this. It will get a keyframe here. And then it will get a keyframe here. So now I'm watching the animation from the perspective view. Now I'm hitting spacebar to go into my hitting spacebar to go into my 4-way split screen, and here going into camera view. And you can see the vertex is keyframed there as well. So now it's time to render. Now here's how you do it. And this is really where things get ridiculous, because setting up a scene to render in Maya is this ridiculous multi-step process. You've probably already gotten frustrated with rendering things in After Effects, where you have to choose the settings. So you find this guy. Notice that, again, mercifully, although this completely changes our top menus, I just told you that so that when you find tutorials, if you pursue this, and then the windows you dive into, or you're asked to go to here, or the menu options rather, they aren't the ones that are in the tutorial. This is why. But actually, you can do quite a lot just by clicking on these icons. So this is your render settings, and these 2 tabs, here is where you set the quality. And you actually don't need to dive into these options at first. You can just choose preview, intermediate, production, blah, blah, blah. Production quality is fine. Yeah. Here's where you set the quality, and here is where you decide what format to render. And here is another potential pitfall, which is that by default, it's set to this format you can't use easily in almost anything else. So, QuickTime render can sometimes be problematic. You can try it, but I would recommend just doing PNG files. Here's the next bizarre thing you have to look out for. By default, it will put the file extension, a dot, and then a frame number. I don't know why. This is not how we are used to doing things. You can choose one of these here. Name, number, extension, name. There. That's once again, this .ext is just the example. Then you have to set your frame number. By default, it's not all the frames in your actual animation. Just type that in. Then choose your camera. Otherwise, it just renders the perspective window. You can render any window you want. Alpha channel, mask, size.
Now you choose the size.
Right. Choose the pixel size. And now, you're ready to go. You can render a single frame by clicking on this icon.
Which one?
This guy. I forget what IPR render is. I think it's a hardware. I think it's like a GPU render. I'm not sure. I think so. Anyway, but this is the software render. Anyway, so now you're ready to go. You're ready to render to disk. Well, now you need to dive into this guy. You need to set this to rendering. Go to the render menu and say batch render. And then it will always remind you this is the academic version.
Where does it say?
There we go. That's another thing. I think there is a way to customize this. But by default, it goes to Documents, Maya, Projects, Default, Images. And here we go. Well, it's rendering out 48. These are HD frames. And we have a lot of other stuff going on. Oops. The reward here is that this is the standard. This is the Photoshop of 3D. It's the most popular. It has the largest user community. I mean, these are its quirks. But like, I hope I've gotten you through getting into it, making a thing, getting it out. Like, this is where a lot of people fall down, essentially. Like, you can also export things from. Can I keep going? You can also export things. You can keep working while it's rendering, by the way. You can also export things as objects. File, export selection, object, and you can import them. Not, unfortunately, point clouds directly got it on the Connect, but anything in Reconstruct Me, for example, you can bring in. So we can look at Photoshop painting textures for next time if you're interested in that. ZBrush is a great way to model Sculptress.
You can bring in that PL1.
I don't know. I think you might need to convert it into an object file first. Yeah.
What happens when you have the camera movement in my export to bring it into After Effects? Does that create other camera?
I don't know how to go from Maya to After Effects camera. Once again, Cinema 4D, the interoperability is built right in, meaning it's not some hacky thing to do with the script. It's actually a feature of the program that they can read each other's project files. They can't share assets. They can't directly load up a 3D animation in After Effects. But the camera movement, any nulls that you have, those are all by design exchangeable. That's why we're hearing more about Cinema 4D. They decided they couldn't compete with the big 3D apps on features broadly, so they decided to go for compatibility with After Effects, which is they're in a niche and it's a good one. And also their Python scripting apparently is really good. So we've just rendered this. We've rendered this series of things, so now we're ready to bring it into After Effects. For ease of use, I have a script that seems to work well. Like I have a whole bunch of different broken camera exchange things. But
it will work pretty well if you don't have the camera in Just bring in like OBJ sequence that will play out.
you can bring in an OBJ sequence. I have a script that will work reasonably well for getting. I think I've linked it in earlier days for getting AE camera to Maya. So you could set up your camera, render a scene, and then here is how you bring things in. I'm navigating to Maya, Projects Default, Images. And here we are. So yeah, you could keeping your main project in After Effects, export your camera to Maya using that script that works pretty well, and then render something out and bring it in and it'll match. I think we've done the demo before, but we can keep doing. Okay, so yeah, keep in touch, I guess, with any questions, and we'll see you. Have a good break. Yeah.
I just realized now, because I didn't know that